Hello and welcome to the Franchise Tag Podcast with me, your host, Freddie Hall. I hope you're doing all okay out there. Football's getting closer. We had the Hall of Fame game only the other day between the Steelers and the Cowboys. A little taster of the NFL coming back very slowly. And of course, today, though this episode is probably going out later than it is anticipated, that the premium tickets for Tottenham came out today with the absurd prices that they were that I've seen, which, if you want to pay that much, then that's all good for you. But it looks like the tickets are available for Tottenham and they're selling pretty darn quick. But we are back with the Future of the Franchise series, and we have Kevin on with us. He is the co-host of the NFL Draft Punk podcast. He is here to talk with us about his Minnesota Vikings and their pick at 23, the offensive tackle from Virginia Tech, Christian Darrisaw. Kevin, were you one of them people today that got on at 10 o'clock? Have you got your premium ticket for Tottenham, or have you used your money best wise?
I'm waiting for someone else to sort something out and ask me if I want to go. I think is the best thing.
Someone out there's got to treat you, Kevin. We all need to be treated every now and then, don't we, my man? We all need to be treated every now and then. The draft was, feels like a lifetime ago now in April, obviously, quite a while ago. But what was your reaction on the night to Minnesota Vikings trading down to begin with, which we'll probably talk about in a moment. But what was your reaction to the Christian Darrisaw pick?
Well, it was a much-needed area, really. We got rid of Riley Reef. He became a cap casualty. We asked him to restructure earlier on this season from the Ngakoue trade, if you can remember that far back, which also seems like even more lifetime ago. So we definitely needed to look at that area and bolster it and get someone there who would be there for several years, rather than getting into the sort of the crapshoot of free agency with kind of players like Villanueva, Eric Fisher, Russell Okung being available for sort of 1 or 2 seasons. It seemed like the right pick at that spot. A lot of mocks, I know Arif Hassan's big board on The Athletic, the consensus board, had him going a lot higher. I wasn't massively high on him as other tackles, but if you're talking about kind of grading offensive linemen, just some stats. I obviously got some stats because I was going to be on here. In the PFF era, they actually had him as last year's the second best lineman in the PFF era, behind Penei Sewell's 2019 season. So from that perspective, value, yeah, all good, really.
There was quite a bit of hype going into the draft with him, and he was one of the few offensive tackles that actually played in the 2020 season. I know a lot of the others opted out. But what impressed you the most with his time with Virginia Tech?
Well, I think it was quite a run-heavy offense, and which really suits us down to the ground with what we want to do with Dalvin Cook. He's a big man. I think he moves pretty well. The way he kind of uses his reach blocks on the O-line is at a particularly high level. Got standing feet when he gets out on the move into space. He's quite a frightening prospect. He's kind of over 320 pounds, a big dude, 6'5", 34-inch arms. So he uses them pretty well to his advantage. I think he's great for what we want to do, to be honest.
Yeah, he was definitely, well, I would go as far to say he was definitely the best left tackle at college last season, obviously with the opt-out. So it's an absolute great choice. He ticked all the boxes of the usual things: great hands, great feet. But I think the big thing that's really shone for me with him was his discipline. I think he didn't draw many penalties. I think it was only 3 penalties he drew, and he had no sacks and no hits given last season as well. So I think there's more than just a prototype left tackle. There's a bit more behind him, and I think he's definitely going to be good for the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. I guess it concerns me a little with how run heavy that offense was at Virginia Tech. I don't think he was ever really put on an island too much, and a lot of times because of this sort of constant movement on their line, he was obviously a lot of the time down blocking, and sometimes the defensive end who he was lined up against would be running free. You'd get traps and whams coming from fullbacks or other guards pulling. But like I said, for us and our offensive line, what we want to do, we want to run the ball. Mike Zimmer's philosophy is clear: run, defend well, and get deep shots off the play action pass, which probably come on to Kirk Cousins, I guess, later, and what people think of him. But from the play action perspective, he's very accurate, and he's good at downfield when everything is running to structure, which is exactly what we need to do.
Well, is that going to help him then adapt into the NFL? You say about the scheme that was going on at Virginia Tech, and really the names as well that are on the offensive line for the Vikings. You've got Brian O'Neill, still Garrett Bradbury, Ezra Cleveland, very, very decent offensive linemen. When looking at rankings on PFF, stuff like that, I was a bit offended, to be honest, by how low they ranked the offensive line for the Vikings. I think it's a lot better than it's given credit for. It's got 2020, you're ranked 26th at the end of that season. At the start of this season, you're now ranked 27th. And I think that's unfair, personally. I think the players that you've got in there are way better than PFF, but that's another argument for another time about what PFF know. But with the names that you have there, and with the, like I said, the scheme being very similar, and that Mike Zimmer is going to want to be run heavy, of course he does with Dalvin Cook, how well is he going to adapt into the NFL?
I think there's going to be some issues. The big issue at the minute is he's not playing and he's not practicing. He's not fit. He had off-season surgery on what is described as a core muscle. So I'm guessing there's something around abdominal region. Maybe it's some sort of sports hernia. So he's just not taking reps. So at the minute, we've got our swing tackle, Rashad Hill, playing left tackle at the moment. And in the press conference the other day, Zimmer described it as one step forward, two steps back. But yeah, the whole pick of Darrisaw feels like a very Vikings pick. We did the same. You mentioned Bradbury, someone who I think plays better in run offense rather than passing offense, really. The big concern for me is it's just another player on our offensive line who can't pass block. And that is a real concern. I think at times Darrisaw he's not got that nasty in him. A lot of people sort of fell in love with Tevin Jenkins last year with how violent he was, how he finishes his blocks all the time. It's alarmingly often that Darrisaw doesn't do that. I think he gets good consistency when he is asked to, in his kick slide, when he is asked to kind of pass block, but at times he seems to be a little bit on cruise control, kind of almost playing down to his competition. And you'd just like to see him dominate more. It's almost at times too easy for him, maybe. And I think if he's going to be like that in the NFL, there's going to be some players who may cause him a problem, especially if they're kind of more a quicker rusher, I think. Because if he doesn't get his hands on them, he'll tend to try and redirect rather than control the rep.
Would you say that's probably maybe his biggest weakness then going into the NFL, and the weaknesses that you saw at Virginia Tech was his aggressive? Like Andrew pointed out about 0 penalties. That's a really great stat. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah,
you could also swing that and going 0 penalties. Well, he's not amped up in the games. He's not committed. Or anything like that. That could be a flip side argument. I wouldn't go towards that. I'd go towards it seems that he's a very clean, controlled player. But others could say, like you said, with Tevin Jenkins being more aggressive, being more hyperactive, with being on that line, that Christian Darrisaw wasn't like that.
Yeah, I mean, during this sort of draft time, we can look at players and watch players, but we're never going to get that behind the scenes stuff. And I remember reading a couple of draft guides who'd had, relationships with some of the coaching staff who have got nothing but good things to say about him from his attitude, and that he is a bit of an introverted character. So maybe it's a bit critical that you want, I don't know, it's just like your stereotypical lineman. You want them to get in there and have at it with some people and dominate. So like I said, I think there's going to be some learning curve, but I think he is firmly in at that left tackle. You mentioned Ezra Cleveland. We drafted him last year, and he actually played some reps at guard this year. I don't know whether he's going to stick at guard or not. I think that seems to be the direction. So I think if that's the case, he's going to be playing left guard next to Darrisaw. So he's not going to have any experience next to him. You mentioned our O-line. I think you've been very kind. Our O-line, our interior especially, is appalling, to be brutally honest, of how much pressure they give up. And I'd rather there was a more settled line that he comes into, because I think fans are going to get on him like they do the rest of the line quite quickly if he doesn't pick it up.
You just briefly touched on some of his weaknesses that he's got there and stuff like that, but I don't know whether that's just a case of the teams he was going up against, because I think if you look through his tape and look at his games, the UNC game and the Miami game, probably the two best games to watch of him for tape. and they're against the bigger, more NFL ready players coming through. Obviously, I think Quincy Roche marked out the game for Miami. So I think maybe like we're looking too much into that as a weakness that he didn't finish, because the opponents weren't quite there for him, because he did step it up in the big games, which I think is a good thing. I think that's definitely, I agree with you that he didn't finish the plays all the time, and he sort of like, did sort of go off the ball after he'd done his first job. I think my main concern with him was the groin injury that he played with through the back end of the year. I think that's what the surgery has come from as well. Like I said, he's not played much, and there's worries he's not going to play week 1. So I think that's probably my biggest worry with him.
Yeah, he's going to be starting off from scratch at a position where really you want him to get reps and familiarity, calling protections, understanding everything about being part of that offensive line unit. So, yeah, he's clearly going to be behind the 8 ball, really, isn't he?
You were heralded in the draft of having a fantastic first round, because you did move from that 14 position with the Jets. The Jets move up in the taker, AVT, Elijah Vera Tucker. You guys move down to 23, and you get Christian Darrisaw, and everyone was of the mindset really that, wow, they moved all the way down and still got the player that they probably were going to take. Now, I'd argue if you stayed there, you would have taken AVT, I think, personally. But you still got a quality offensive lineman. Yes, we've talked about his strengths and weaknesses, and there seems to be a lot of both, really. But were you impressed? Were you surprised or impressed by the fact that they did move down? Did you see it coming?
Yeah, it's classic Rick Spielman stuff. Our general manager. We have 15 selections in the 2020 draft, which was a record. 11 selections this year. We didn't have a second round pick because of that Ngakoue trade that happened earlier in the season. Then we traded him away again for a third round. So I really felt there was a lot of value within those picks of kind of 20 moving up to sort of 40 to 50. And I really hope we get the second round, but I felt we got quite a lot of value out of that pick. I know the Jets and Jets fans. I went on a Jets podcast actually, and they didn't take to it very well, but I was a bit critical of them moving up for a guard. I just don't see the point in it, because your interior is only as good as your worst player. And I just didn't see the point, despite the fact I really liked Vera Tucker as a player. I thought he was dominant. And I actually wondered at the time whether he would go and play tackle somewhere, because I thought he was good enough to do that. But he'll probably be a better guard at this level. But I mean, if you look at kind of Jimmy Johnson trade charts, or if you want to go analytics and look at the PFF WAR chart, then we more than made up for that. And the only thing I was disappointed with is that we stuck in the third round and had four picks in the third round and didn't move up into the second. But classic Spielman, classic analytical route of having as many throws as you can, trade down, get value. And I thought it was an awkward spot we picked at 14 with our needs, especially the kind of, if there was any other needs with corner potentially being one, because of what happened with Jeff Gladney with his off the field stuff we've now released. So because the best corners come off the board, I genuinely wonder, it's a bit of a joke that Vikings constantly pick corners, but I wonder if they hadn't, would we have stayed there and picked a corner maybe? But no.
Who was available? Who was available at that point then?
Yeah, I mean, the player that I wondered is, I mean, you said AVT. I mean, again, Darrisaw would not have been. I don't think many people would raise eyebrows if he was picked there. I think Jalen Phillips was available, but a lot of Phillips would have scared a lot of people off, I think.
Caleb Farley as well. That people are scared off by his injuries, but I mean, people have argued that he's the top corner coming out this year. You know, and he was there as well. I know he dropped down to the Titans at just before you, the pick before you guys he was there. So I mean, like you said, it's a tricky position there at 14, isn't it? Because in some people's minds, the best players are gone, which that's not true, because you can get great players wherever in the draft. We don't really know. It's a monopoly, and it's not monopoly. It's a lottery. So we don't really know. But again, I think you got 2 third rounders, and you gave up a 4th rounder, and obviously traded the first. So yeah, it's unsurprising that then you didn't move up into second. If you were to move up in second, would it have been to take a corner, or or another type of player like that? What would you have liked to have targeted with that?
Yeah, when we needed edge, but I don't think it was particularly great edge class. We did pick 2 edge players, Patrick Jones, who I was actually a big fan of from Pittsburgh. I mean, you mentioned like the competition that Darrisaw had come up against in the ACC as well. I thought Jones is a good player, and I've got
Andrew's a huge fan of him as well.
Yeah, I really liked him. I really liked his first step. I actually went big or go home and predicted that he'd start for the Vikings by the end of the season. So there's your big take there. But yeah, I mean, a corner again, really, and I wondered whether they'd go up into the second round and potentially draft Harrison Smith's replacement as well, because I thought there was a good sweet spot for safeties with Trayvon Murray dropping, Richie Grant in there as well, but they then did go quite early into the second round.
Yeah, I had Patrick Jones very high on my board. I thought he'd easily go in the second round with his ability, if not late first round with how good he actually was and his stats that back it up. I thought you picked up another player that was on my board, and I had him as a real high second round pick, and that was Wyatt Davis as well, who you picked up from Ohio State. I think he's going to strengthen your O-line massively as well, so that's another piece to the puzzle. I know it's going to be now a very young offensive line with 3 real young kids on there, but with that being said, do you think there was a bigger need for maybe another attacking weapon? Obviously, you've never really replaced Stephon Diggs. Carl Rudolph's gone. So do you think wide receiver should have been something you could have looked at?
You don't think we replaced Diggs with Jefferson?
Well, yeah, I do think that is a replacement, as in you've now got 2 wide receivers, 2 excellent wide receivers. But that's it. I don't think there's any depth past that. So you're still missing a spot.
Yeah, that's very fair. There's not much behind them, is there? Yeah, there isn't a lot behind them. That is still a little bit of a concern that there's a reasonable open competition in camp. Chad Beebe is like the slot and not the safest pair of hands. Yeah, I was surprised that they waited till, was it Emir Smith-Marset pick to get someone at that spot, I believe. So I think, last season was the second in franchise history with the amount of TDs scored behind the 2009 season with the Brett Favre ridiculous season that we had there. But everyone stayed fit more or less, including Cook, who had like 2 or 3 games out. And we weren't the same when he was out and Madison was in. So yeah, again, making the use of those third round picks. I wasn't a fan of the Chaz Surratt selection at all. And I know they like these kind of mobile linebackers, and Anthony Barr's restructured, and it looks as if it'll probably be his last season here. But I just felt, yeah, like you say, that's a fair point, that a receiver would have been potentially something to build on, get another young guy in there.
Yeah,
I was about to go wild at Andrew. I was like, well, you're meant to know all these things about the NFL, and they didn't replace Stephon Diggs. Justin Jefferson was amazing last year.
Yeah,
you nearly slipped up.
Yeah, I didn't mean it as in like you didn't replace him for like on like. I mean, you left the hole. Is what I was saying, sort of thing. Not that he wasn't a good replacement. Yeah, it was just
we didn't have much behind him either. To be fair, when Diggs was there with Thielen, it was still a concern, really, because I think Laquan Treadwell was receiver 3, who was obviously a massive draft bust for us. So we never really had much behind him, and it still worries me a bit now that if one of them goes down, you're essentially really shadowing one of those receivers with a safety. But I'm really hoping Ev Smith steps up this year. He's still very young. I think he's still only 22, I believe. And I'm really hoping he steps up with Rudolph now gone. A lot of 12 personnel sets potentially. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do, because I think, tight end is usually a difficult position to come into the NFL. You don't usually produce early with that, do you? So excited to see what he can bring this year.
I think we've already seen a bit of news already of Justin Jefferson going down with an injury in training. So yeah, it's got to be a slight worry. And I think you had an absolute fantastic offseason with strengthening the defense. So yeah, I thought offense was a massive need for some more weapons. Obviously, you are run heavy, but yeah, I just thought you're missing a couple of pieces still.
Yeah, I think it's the problem if people get injured, isn't it? I think defensively we were so bad last year. Zimmer's a defensive coach. We lost a lot of players in free agency. We had to draft 2 corners because of the complete drop off in play of Xavier Rhodes. He was on a fairly big contract, and in the 2019 season, get my years sorted here, his drop off was massive. You had Linval Joseph, who we got rid of as well, who just wasn't playing the same. We got Michael Pearson from the Ravens, who then opted out with COVID. So we then had nobody big enough on the defensive line to warrant a double team. And the player who was double teamed, I think something like 5th most in the NFL last year, was Ifedi Odenigbo, who is just not good enough really to win consistently one-on-one. Daniil Hunter was out injured all season with a neck injury, who apparently just looks a beast. I know it's like pre-season and everyone looks good, but he apparently really looks back to his old self. We got Ngakwe in, as I said, when I guess it was quite naive to think that we would compete last season. And he was actually still the sack leader, believe it or not, after all 16 games. And he played like 5 games for us. Kendricks missed the last 5 games of the season, bar injured with a torn pectoral muscle after 3 or 4 games. I think the Titans game, whichever game that was, game 3 maybe. So really exposed, especially with Zimmer's coverage in what he does, this kind of man match scheme that demands a lot from his corners, puts them in difficult situations and makes them make decisions really quickly, depending on routes. And in the end, I think after the bye week, we just reverted back to cover 2 just to give our young corners some help from Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris. So, and then you obviously look at that Christmas Day game where Alvin Kamara just completely ran over us. And I think Zimmer just looked and said, this is just not happening to me again. Probably gives him nightmares. So it was probably a little overreaction in really strengthening up that defense, but it's just completely transformed, to be honest. It's not going to be anywhere near what it is from last season. And I think it really should be back into top 10 again if everyone plays well.
Is that what was missing from last year, from this year to last year, was that the injuries just affected you guys so much? Because when we talk on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, 6,292 total yards. That was 4th in the NFL. I know a lot of this is Dalvin Cook. Like, I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but 4,009 passing yards, which is 14th. Still good, top 15. Offense passing yards. Is this year going to be the next step? It's going to be the step up now that the players are back healthy. Do you trust in the offense? Do you trust in Kirk Cousins? I mean, when you look at offense, Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, I mean, teams dream of having a trio like that on their offense. And what can be the expectations of the Vikings this year?
Well, I believe that they're putting, especially with some of the free agency signings, with some corner veterans, with Patrick Peterson and Bashar Breeland coming in there. I believe that they think they're competing. They are going all in, because I think if they, for example, fail to make the playoffs, I think there could really be a complete regime change. Cousins was brought in with, at the time, quite a high contract. There is no such thing as a good QB contract, and I don't really look at it and moan too much about his contract, because I keep being told on Vikings Twitter, which is at times a poisonous place to be, that his money stopped us from getting free agents in, and I don't think it has, to be brutally honest. But like you said, top 5 in offense total yardage, yards per play. We don't actually pass the ball that much, so from a passing efficiency perspective, we were really good. We rely on play action. The big issue really is anything off script, and Cousins is just completely reluctant to pull the trigger if the play is not going as expected and as designed. But to be fair to him, like we said, the offensive line, you mentioned like the PFF stats. PFF graded the interior unit. So guard center guard unit cumulatively over 3 seasons, they managed a 44.2 pass block grade. And for relativity, the next best interior is Seattle with a 53.1 grade. And a top ranked Cleveland with 89.8. So if you actually take like the 96 team season, so all 32 teams interior grades, the Vikings ranked 80th in 2018, 90th in 2019, and dead last 96th in 2020.
Oh wow!
So he at times there were games where I think over 40% of of dropbacks, he's under pressure. Now, I don't care who your quarterback is. We saw that in the Super Bowl. You can't get around that. And Cousins, athletically, is probably about the lowest limit you want of a QB athlete nowadays with what they're asked to do. So it's difficult. I'm always in life in general. I'm kind of a glass half empty kind of guy. So I never really believe that we'll win anything until we win it. And I don't really ever think Cousins is the man to take us to the promised land. But I do think we can be competitive. I do think we can enjoy some games and enjoy the season. I certainly don't put us down as Super Bowl prospects. I think we'd have comfortably won the NFC North if Rodgers wasn't back, but he is, and I still only see 2 teams in that. But with 7 teams going into the off season, I'd expect us to get there. But it is quite a tough schedule this season because we've got the AFC North and the NFC West, I think, as well. And the Chargers as the opposite AFC game for that extra game. So quite a tough schedule.
Two of the hardest divisions.
I did have a quick look through your schedule, and I think I had you down as 8 possible 9 winnable games that I think you should win. Now, you say if that's enough to qualify in one of the wildcard spots, you say if you don't qualify and you do have an overhaul, do you think that kellermund could be a potential future quarterback for you?
If he has a vaccination. I don't know whether you've seen much of the stuff at the moment, but we had a practice squad QB, a guy called Jake Browning, taking all our snaps for about 3 days this week because of the I think Mond had it or was down as a close contact. So then everyone who he was with, Nate Stanley, don't even know what he's still doing on our roster, and Kirk Cousins had to essentially completely avoid the facility. I was pleased to pick up Mond. I thought that was a good pick. The organization told Cousins they were going to pick a QB in the draft this year. I kind of felt disappointed going back to the draft that if we were prepared to do it for Justin Fields, that we didn't make that move and go up and do it if we really thought highly of him. But I don't think they wanted to give up capital in future years, so future firsts. But looking at what the Bears gave up to move up, 10 spots, 11 spots, was just nothing, really, in comparison. I think Mond has got potential. I think he's got a long way to go, looking at some of the stuff in camp. And the fact that he's, again, not been able to take snaps. I think if we see him this season, we're in trouble. But you obviously want to see progression. I thought he ran the offense quite well. At A&M, he was asked to do quite a lot. And I think the ball does come out of his hand nicely. But there's still a lot of learning to do. At the end of the day, he was a 3rd-round pick, and I think that was about the right place for him, developmental.
Yeah, you've definitely brought him in to sit and learn, which is what he definitely needed. I actually really rated him. I thought he was very underrated going into the draft. I think the fact that he was in a very poor A&M team, I think if he was at any of the big names, any of the sort of SEC teams that were competing, I think he probably would have been high on a lot of boards. But with the way he plays and how good he can control the ball and throw the ball, so I think you've got a good one there for the future. And fingers crossed. I wouldn't mind seeing him being a starter one day if he is good enough.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly brave in the pocket, which I thought really stood out when watching him. But yeah, it'd just be interesting to see how he progresses, really. But like I said, it just feels a bit of an opportunity missed the way that the Bears came above us, to be honest.
Well, lots of cute kellermund going. Aaron Rodgers, is he staying or is he going? Now staying. It's all such craziness still. Justin Fields coming into the division. Jared Goff coming into the division. I don't know. I don't know how that's a big highlight, but Matt Stafford leaving the division is probably more of a highlight, really, than Jared Goff coming in. Kevin, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's been really interesting chatting to you about the Minnesota Vikings and Christian Darrisaw and the future of the Vikings as well. Where can we find your podcast, NFL Draft Punk?
You can find us on all the usual places: Spotify, Apple, Google. We are on Twitter at NFL Draft Punk Pod. We are back to recording now. We got a bit lazy in the off season, but yeah, we kind of follow the draft, follow college players throughout the season leading up to the draft 2022. We're all back in now, so let's go.
Oh, smashing. Well, college football starts very soon as well as the NFL. It's all creeping up on us, guys. It's getting ever closer, and we are buzzing, excited for it to finally happen. Thank you for watching the Franchise Tag podcast. We'll be back again with the Future of the Franchise series. More episodes coming, and then we'll get our main channel episodes show out very soon because the season is only around the corner. But until then, we'll see you very soon, and have a great week. Cheers.